What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about this record right here. This is Freddie Gibbs Madlib, Bandana, released on Madlib Invasion in 2019. This was easily one of my most anticipated records of 2019. Already being a huge fan of their previous project, Pinata, thinking that this contained some of Madlib's finest beats, and Freddie Gibbs proved himself to be a pretty formidable rapper. I was really looking forward to them working together and hoping that this album wasn't just going to be a one-off project. So there had been rumors about the release of Bandana all the way back in 2016, I think, and considering that Madvillainy 2 has been rumored about for so long, I wasn't entirely sure whether or not this album would actually end up seeing the light of day. But after it got a release date and after all the tracks started rolling in, I started getting super hyped for this record and couldn't wait to get my hands on it. And now that I've given this record quite a few listens, I want to share my thoughts and opinions of it with you guys and let you know whether or not I think it lives up to the hype. So with that being said, let's talk about this guy. So first off, I don't think Freddie Gibbs and Madlib need any more introduction. You should be familiar with them at this point. Freddie Gibbs, rapper from Gary, Indiana, been building a buzz for quite some time. Madlib, a modern day legend of a beat maker whose back catalog is so large and extensive you could fill a hip-hop museum with it. And their previous collaboration, Pinata, turned out to be something of a modern day masterpiece, and I still swear by it, saying that it was one of the best hip-hop records of the 2010s. So with these guys collaborating again, the expectations were pretty high, but also one thing kind of I expected going into this record was, much like Madlib has said in many an interview about a lot of the tracks that he has completed for Madvillainy 2, this project, much like that one, wasn't going to be anything really all that different from the previous release. That it would just be more of a continuation rather than a departure from what they did before. And quite honestly, you probably could subtitle this record Pinata 2. It really does feel like it's cut from the same cloth, but in some ways it does feel like over time, with Madlib just continuing to grow as a producer and Freddie Gibbs gaining more notoriety and also growing as a rapper himself, they are both showing that they are just getting better at their craft. So while the sort of overall broad picture of this record does sound like sort of the next stage in these guys' music career, I have to say straight up front, Madlib's production on here is in top form as usual. He's not really stretching himself that much as a producer these days, but it does seem like he's refined his style so well that he's become basically, if you want a producer who does those classic funk, soul, jazz, psych chops, you pretty much have to go to Madlib at this point. He is really like the one producer who nobody does it better at this point. And he really does prove that on this record. He goes from a wide palette of sampling sources to working from reggae tracks, classic funk, classic soul tracks, obscure shit, going through some of the funniest skit samples I've heard yet in a Madlib record to date. And some of the songs on here have some of the most effective, catchy, and memorable loops and melodies that I've heard from a Madlib project since Pinata, which before that, it was Madvillainy. Honestly, Madlib, once again, has knocked it out of the park on this project. Whether he's just doing some more boom-bappy shit, doing some straight-up soul loops, and whether he's going into some more sort of weird, abstract, psychedelic territory, or whether he, on this album, does a couple of almost straight-up trap tracks on here. Madlib's production on this record proves, once again, to be the standout star of this record. And for Madlib's beats alone on this project, I have to recommend it. They're frequently catchy, they're frequently unpredictable, so many left hooks, so many great switch-ups in each one one of the tracks. They're ultimately the star of the show. Except for, I will say, on a couple of tracks on here, some of the vocals really take over the mix of the song, and in some ways it does seem like the rappers, specifically on the track Palm Olive with Pusha T and Killer Mike, it really does seem like the sample and Freddie Gibbs, Pusha T, and Killer Mike are all fighting to get over the mix in the track. It's a small thing. It has popped up on Madlib tracks in the past, but other than being kind of a slight distraction, it really doesn't take away from the overall enjoyment of the track, and it doesn't take away from the fact that the quality of the tracks on here from Madlib are absolutely outstanding, and for that reason alone, I recommend that you check this record out. So let's get to Freddie Gibbs. As I mentioned in my review of Pinata, Freddie Gibbs has been pretty much sticking to his gangsta shtick largely since he started building a name for himself in 2010. And he continues to do that on this record. From a lyrical content perspective, I feel like that's sort of the weakest element of this record. And in some instances, specifically on Pusha T's track, or one of the last tracks with Black Thought and Yazim Bey, he absolutely gets outshined by the lyrical quality and just the overall insightfulness that some of the guests on here bring. Despite my sort of issues with Freddie Gibbs sort of repeating himself, I would really like to just get someone to put out a bitch counter for how many times Freddie Gibbs says that on this record. I will say this, Freddie Gibbs on a technical skill level is in another world on this record. Seriously, some of the flow switch ups on this record are absolutely insane. Whether he's on beat, slightly off beat, going into double time, switching up, throwing all of those different rhythmic patterns into one of his songs, Freddie Gibbs on a technical skill level is absolutely impressive on this record. And my only one disappointment with this record is it doesn't really feel like Freddie Gibbs is really stretching himself out that much. He does delve into some more personal tracks throughout this record, and he does go into a little bit of social commentary, a little bit about some of his troubled relationships in the past. But ultimately, even when he does that, doesn't feel like he's quite as comfortable as he is doing his usual gangsta shtick. As much as it sounds like I'm ragging on Freddie Gibbs for basically taking one thing and sticking to it and trying to be the best at it that he possibly can, it does wear me down a little bit while listening to this record, but it's not a deal breaker for me. Ultimately, I get a lot of my entertainment from this record, like I said, from Madlib's beats and production on this record, and Freddie Gibbs' just top tier technical skill. I do feel like the weakest aspect of this record is some of the lyrical content could have been a little bit more varied, but even with that sort of complaint, which honestly, I basically said the same thing about Pinata, you gotta give it to Freddie for having a super forceful delivery. He does that all throughout this record. His technical skills are on point, and I would say that Freddie Gibbs definitely goes toe to toe with any of the rappers that are out now. I do want to shout out specifically Anderson .Paak's performance on this record is so nice and does a great job not only lending a great hook, but also a great rap as well. And it really makes me hope that someday in the future we'll get to hear a purely Anderson .Paak and Madlib project. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this record. I would say for me, it's about even with Pinata, but the high moments on Pinata, I think I actually end up liking a lot more. But that being said, I still can't recommend this project enough. Definitely one of my favorite hip-hop records of 2019, and if you have not checked this record out, I can't recommend it enough. So Freddie Gibbs, Madlib, Bandana, definitely one of the best records of 2019. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to this record, please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to check this record out for yourself, please head over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs, because that's where I will be posting audio links links to this record or any of the records that I talk about on this channel. And please head over to my Mixcloud, where you can now check out the Raw Select Music podcast, which is basically more of a conversation about music with a friend of mine, as well as my Raw Select radio show, where there you can hear some of the records that I talk about on this channel, as well as a whole host of other records that are in my collection that maybe I haven't gotten a chance to talk about. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. So that's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!